Boom.
And we are on in 3, 2. Greetings and salutations, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The Toronto Show is on. Akil, Augustine, Money, Mitch, Justin, Brandon. Today's episode is titled White Privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might be asking, why is today's episode titled White Privilege? Well, the NBA playoffs are upon us, and we're all, well, except for Justin. What are you doing over there? He's checking his phone.
He's checking his
on
notes.
Instagram.
He's looking at his notes, getting ready.
We're pretty much big basketball fans with the NBA playoffs here. Yeah. Something that popped up recently, there was an incident between Russell Westbrook and a fan that people say was racially motivated.
Racially charged, yeah.
And it brought, I guess, light to the mind of Kyle Korver, a player who plays for Utah where the incident happened. Yeah. So he decided to pen an article with the Players Tribune. Justin, what are you doing over there? People can see you.
Shout out to Kyle Korver, man. Great piece.
It's a great... my boy Gareth, when we were on the hangout last night, was like, well, remember, he didn't write it. They found a writer.
Sure.
But no.
That's what I was wondering, too.
He articulated
Did he write it?
Did he write that?
Yeah.
In the middle of the playoffs.
Yo, he's got some skills.
Sat down,
and some time,
penned an essay.
You know?
So
well written.
I think, I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about, okay, so basically what happens in the article is he expresses dismay at his own race, I guess.
I thought he wrote that.
His actions. He really said he was, because of the incident in New York with Thabo, he was mad at the way he looked at it. He immediately said...
So to give them reference, he was teammates, I think they were on the Hawks at the time with Thabo Sefolosha. They had a road game in New York City.
New York, yeah.
Back-to-back.
Yeah.
Thabo went out on a back-to-back. A back-to-back is when you play one night and you play the next night.
Exactly.
Veteran players don't usually go out. Kyle didn't go out. Thabo gets into an altercation with the cops. The cops break his ankle or his leg.
Done for the season.
He wins the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Got like 50. I don't know how much he got.
Yeah.
But
kind of just went away though.
But so you were saying Kyle was upset at the way he reacted when he heard the news.
Exactly. He didn't like his reaction to it. He just kind of blamed Thabo, like, well, he shouldn't have been out on a back-to-back, or you know. And then he thought, well, if that was me, if I went out, I wouldn't have probably been harassed by a police officer or assaulted, because
his mind state was like, you don't get in trouble with the cops unless you're doing something wrong.
Doing something wrong, exactly.
His white privilege was showing. That's why he got mad.
For sure.
He got upset after.
So that's really, for me, I think from the article, that was the biggest takeaway. It was like, his mind state was, if you get into an altercation with the cops, that he's generalizing that the cops are usually in the right. Yeah. And it's a very different reality. I'll speak for myself and say, you know, coming from very acute and specific circumstances, I grew up knowing, avoid the cops. Do not interact with the police as much as you can. You see them at school, be cordial, but you don't want to be put in a position. And I grew up in Toronto in the 90s, right? So it's like, I don't know if everyone has that experience here.
No. I mean, with me in Nova Scotia, like, it's way different. I mean, I'm viewed as a black man in Nova Scotia. Obviously, I'm mixed. I'm partially
anywhere you
white.
are, one
I
drop.
mean, definitely. But in Nova Scotia, there is a lot of racism, and there's a lot of, like, amongst the black community especially. I mean, there's something happening right now with Music Nova Scotia where all the applicants, it's like 96% of them that are approved are white. And
for what?
For music grants.
So
Music Nova Scotia. So some of my friends that do music back home are attacking this, and
what's the population percentage? How white is Nova Scotia?
How white? I would say it's at least 75% white.
Okay.
I would say, don't quote me on that, but that's
Google it.
Yes, I didn't do my research in that, but I would say it's about 60 to 70% white.
So predominantly.
Google it up. Yeah, predominantly white for sure. But we do have the largest black community in Canada, so that is something that a lot of people don't even know about.
I'm going to interrupt this very important conversation just to point out that we are on our own today. Our producer Chris, it's his grandma's 80th birthday
Shout out
weekend.
To Chris, man.
Shout out to Chris. He's prepping, so we're left on our own. So this may be technically the worst episode we ever do in terms of production value.
It's going to be the best, man. It's going to be the best.
But Justin, 4 years. Did that jump out at you? Because for me, like, what jumped out at you with the article? Because for me, it was this.
Well, I'm still hung up on this new information. He didn't even write the thing.
Well, okay, no. I imagine, because this has been a conversation I've had with
We can
players,
imagine all we want. He
It's
didn't even
players
write
tricky.
it.
I'm saying
He articulated it, though.
he spoke
sat
the
with
words
somebody.
to a journalist who
Yeah.
then took those words and formulated
made them
it into
better.
a piece.
That's what they put in it. Well, and then he
So he
reread
white
it
privileged
and-
the white privilege.
Oh God, don't do that. Everybody does that.
All the
Everybody
black guys are on Players Tribune doing the exact same
Are they?
thing. Yeah.
He said he white privileged.
People are writing. I don't think people are writing.
Why
their
are
own
they
articles.
making statement pieces like
that's
this
a
if they're
lot of-
not even writing them?
That's the question that you would
That's
have
a
to ask
crazy
the Players
question.
Tribune.
Okay, so that's a different point of view on it, for sure, right?
Are they being honest or disingenuous?
You could just call the guy and said, "Yo, write something riveting about this." Saw some shit.
No,
Give
you can
quotes.
tell
You gotta give him some quotes.
a lot of it's articulated from his point of view
Yeah.
and his perspective as a player and
Writers can
his
do that,
view.
you know.
And he
Writers
said,
can be other
you know,
people.
I see, and what brought it back up was Russ's altercation with a Jazz fan, but maybe a month ago now, that was racially charged, and it kind of brought a bunch of stuff back up for Kyle, and he then just kind of he said he had to speak on it because he felt like he was one of the more recognizable white faces in the NBA, you know? And he's a leader, he's a veteran, he's highly respected in the league.
Yeah.
Hell of a teammate from what I've heard. So
A champion.
champion, yeah. Shout out to Kyle Korver, man. So
I mean, yeah, it was a cool
great
piece.
The shooter.
It's
It wasn't
White
written for
shooter,
you
yeah.
and I. It was definitely written for his
For white
pe-
people.
It was-
white
it
peers
was
written
to
for-
open their
and
eyes.
that's-
So it's hard for me to get a true grasp
true.
of the article. Like, oh,
and that's
wow.
what he says in the article. He says, you know, it's time for us white people to take responsibility, blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
And step up and listen. That's the one thing he said is like we need to listen more. We don't understand where people are coming from.
I'm looking
know?
for the.
Do you think that these words, as much as they are riveting and as much like publicity as they're getting in our community, they're falling on deaf ears, is what I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Falling on deaf ears, or even if it's falling on ears that are open, they're
Yeah.
like, but
I
we're
think-
winning.
I think who's winning?
cares?
Who's we and who's winning?
White privileged people. People that can get white privilege
I know what you're saying,
would
yeah.
never give up white privilege. Even if someone says, hey guys, we kind of are at an advantage. They're like,
Yeah.
well, that's the way it is.
They're
Who
like,
cares?
sick.
So,
All right,
well,
so-
they're like sick, yeah.
like,
Like they're not trying to change that.
Sick. All right, so quickly, I'm going to abandon the Halifax census that I was just looking at because there's way too much information there.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull up the definition of white privilege as Google represents it because
yeah.
that's where everyone's going to go when they search things.
Yes.
So white privilege.
Okay.
Search showing for white privilege.
Like if you said
and the
you'll
first
come
thing that
into
shows
a
up is
store
Kyle Korver.
and just because you're wearing
The first thing that shows up
blue
is
jeans, you
NBA
get a
Kyle
discount.
Korver.
Yeah.
You're not going to be like,
Hold on, wait.
oh.
I'll read it. I'll read it aloud, and then I'll.
Because he's trending, man.
White privilege is the societal privilege that benefits people whom society identifies as white in some countries. Beyond that, it is commonly experienced by non-white people under the same social, political, or economic circumstances.
But we don't experience white privilege. We experience discrimination,
good
beating,
point.
like the worst
Discrimination
side.
is the other
Like,
side of
white privilege is everything is good. It doesn't encompass the bad that can happen when you don't experience that.
I think for
That's
me,
true. Yeah.
like that's why it sounds like, oh, don't worry. It's
Yeah.
like, no, that guy could have got shot because he wasn't white. That guy could have got beat by the police because he wasn't white. You know, that guy got fired, lost his job, or didn't even get a job because of white privilege.
I think I mean, I don't like terms defining things. I think white privilege is just another way of specifying, hate, discrimination, looking at two groups and defining it in that mirror. But I will say this.
No, it's not. It's not really the hate part. It's the privilege
Yes,
part.
I understand.
So like even the people that don't necessarily hate you
they experience
still
an advantage.
experience and know that there is a benefit.
Yes.
And they're not trying to change that or even that.
Now
to
we
a
don't
point.
have a white person on the couch right now, which is unfair. I feel, but this podcast is mostly about us than it is about anything else. So I will play devil's advocate, and not even devil's advocate because of the perspective that I understand. And I'll say this: okay, so do you think the average white person is out there actively undermining the rights of black people?
No.
If someone asked
But
me, I'd say
that's
no.
not white privilege.
I know that. So I was trying to drive this conversation further to defend the other side. So I think what we experience a lot of times is, I think, there were generations past that had prejudices. And when they built a country, they instilled their beliefs on the infrastructure and the governance of that country.
Okay.
And so people say there's economic trickle down. I don't believe in that, but there is trickle down of policy and perspective.
Yeah.
And so when you look at 60 years ago, which we're still operating under a lot of like the laws, a lot of the ideals of 60 years ago, the average white person was probably there was more maliciousness involved in their
But
actions.
does it matter if it's malicious or by accident?
Because it's institutional now.
Yeah.
It's like
that's true.
So it's more intentional now
Yeah.
because
Is
it's
it more
happening and they're just
intentional now?
not doing anything to change it.
I don't know if it's more intentional.
I don't know. I think it's
disagree
more
with
like
It's just not,
not
as
as
in
passive.
your face
It's
mean.
passive.
It's
not
not
as
as
blatant.
passive. It still doesn't mean it's not
that.
intentional.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying it's passive.
It's just passive. It
Yeah,
just
that's all I'm
means
saying. It's just
It's
passive.
an easy death. It's a gas chamber instead of a hammer in your face or a gun to the head.
Absolutely. in
But it's still a
certain
death.
sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
True.
does it matter? Again, like I'm saying?
No, I think it matters if you're trying to understand and solve it because you can't approach it like people are hammering you. Because then if you take the technique that people are hammering you, that's not going to solve that
But
problem.
people are dying.
that's true.
Yes.
So again,
you
does it
got-
matter?
It does because I think if you want to solve a problem, you can't look at it like the old problem. You got to find new solutions to the new problem. So we can't look.
I
So
agree.
But what if the new problem's still the old problem?
is it?
Yeah.
You think it's the same problem? So
Yeah.
we still
This
have,
now, okay. Basically,
it hasn't evolved.
basically they can't be as overt with the privilege or the racism part, but the privilege part replaced the racism part because now it's institutionalized and you can just passively do the same things
I would
to the
disagree.
next generation.
I would argue that simply because I think that what happened in the past generation.
Now you can't come up to a kid and call him a nigger, right?
yeah.
But you can still treat him as such in society.
I think it's harder. It's getting harder and harder.
It's
to
getting
do that.
harder and harder, but
So I
it's still
think that's
happening.
the difference. Yeah. So, but back my point, I was saying we need new
Everybody's
tactics
exposed, yeah.
as opposed to like. And I think this podcast is an
Because
example
they've
of a new
evolved their
tactic.
tactics to this.
Yeah.
We need
They-
new tactics.
Very careful with you. You and
That's
your
why.
theys.
That's why people.
They is what we're
I think
a
talking
lot-
about.
yeah, but I
They're-
think-
I am not white, so I'd have to refer to them as they
Yeah.
Yeah.
or white people. I'm
I just,
sorry.
I just
Yeah.
don't think
You
it's a
know?
consensus.
Yeah.
I think it's more like people are stumbling through. Like, because you look at the black, like, I understand black movements, and I'm looking at them like, is there a consensus, or are there a few strong-headed individuals who kind of drag the followers along, and it's more of a momentum play?
in what? In black people's or
In
white
some of the
privilege?
movements that I've watched,
Okay.
I don't think this is the same thing, but I do believe that the leaders are the businesses and the
In
government.
the leaders on which
of
on
white
which side?
privilege.
Okay.
It's business and government more so now than individuals. I think it's 60
but
years
individuals
ago.
don't want to put themselves at a disadvantage. We are just
Absolutely.
living
Yes.
at a disadvantage.
Agreed.
They would never put themselves even. I don't even think they would put themselves at a level, and that is the scary
define
part.
that at a level.
If there was just to abolish, there's no way to abolish it, and they're not trying. That's what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying? Because if they were trying,
think-
it would have to be a conscious effort to move things to a level.
I think there are
at
people.
least.
I don't think there's a great consensus, but I don't think people move like that. I think there are pockets and groups who are going to advance culture, and in general, you're right. Most people, and you got to look at it like geographically too. I think if you look at aside from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Maine, Northeasterners, even though how we came about our thoughts on race, however manipulated it was in the beginning, it seems a little bit easier. But there are more hardline people in certain regions demographically. You
Yeah.
look at like Western Canada and Central Canada.
Yeah.
The conversation is probably completely
Yeah,
different.
it's a lot different.
Yeah, and there I'd say there's probably more of what you were talking about. Of this like the hammer. The hammer is probably. Hey, if you guys are out there in Calgary, in Vancouver,
But that should apply everywhere because those are still black people. Those are still
No,
white
I'm just
people.
saying. I'm saying how it executes is different. But if you are out there, Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton, Alberta, back up home, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Dartmouth, the whole region, definitely shoot us a message. We'd love to involve you in the conversation. Let's proceed because I know me and Justin can pick any topic and just go at it forever. So as the
I was like,
conversation,
what?
you're in a tennis
That was a
match.
good one. And I'm right in the middle, right? So,
So I guess I
good.
want to ask you guys, and I'll start with you, Mitch, of a specific example of. I'm not going to say white privilege because you haven't experienced white privilege, but definitely racism.
well, countless times back home, just by the bouncers at clubs and just being thrown out for no reason, and just because you're black and they don't like that, or the way you're dressed or whatever, or not being let in. There's been a lot of times growing up being called a nigger, shit like that. I'm light skinned, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's like. I
Did
was
you
just
notice
like,
the difference
I
between
didn't even
your-
realize what it was happening when I'm like 8 years old, 9 years old. Kids beat me up and call me, and I'm like, I don't even know what this is really. You know what I mean?
But
Like,
did you notice a difference between how you were treated and how other darker skinned kids were treated? ever?
Not really, because I just got treated just like a black kid, and like
Yeah.
all my cousins are like, well, most of my cousins are like mixed like me, but I do have some black cousins as well and stuff too, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, but I mean, I grew up with like predominantly white people anyway. So eventually, you know what I mean? Like there was like per group, like in my high school, there was probably like maybe 10 black kids out of like 1,500 kids. You know what I mean? Like that was the high school I went to. So. And 4 of them are my family, my sister and my brothers.
That's hilarious.
You know, shout out to Matt and Jamie Parsons too. You know what I mean?
Justin, for you?
Yeah.
What was the question again, man?
Experience, a
Specific-
racist,
You had a good
racist
long
experience
answer.
you've been through.
Racist experiences?
Yeah.
Or one that stands out to you that speaks to the conversation we're having right now. You
Yes.
gotta pass.
Yo, if you want to think for a second, I seen one on the subway the other day, which was kind of crazy, like 3 days ago.
I'm gonna tell you one just even about coming in this building a couple times. Like,
Oh, the people at the door.
you know, like
Oh,
I say
yeah.
my neighbors aren't friendly.
no.
Yeah,
sir.
they won't let you in, right?
Well, they're friendly to some, as I see.
okay.
You know, but others they seem to be very concerned, even though I'm waiting for someone to buzz me in.
Yeah.
And the door just opened.
Yeah, yeah,
What do you
yeah.
want me to do? Just not walk through it?
Yeah. I hear you.
Like, you want me to hold it open till my friend buzz me in, just to prove to you?
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you.
I think
I've dealt
for-
with that
And
before.
the funniest part is, I've explained it to you. When you kill them with the kindness after, you say thank you.
Oh, definitely.
You told
Definitely,
the other day. You
yeah.
told the lady
do that
how
all
much
the
are they
time.
paying you for your security job?
Yeah, that was after she told me that. She told me again, I shouldn't be letting you in. And I said, well, it's a good thing you're doing your job well because the doors are open. I walked in.
Yeah.
You know?
I think for
Like,
me,
why is she coming out and then so mad that someone else is coming in?
Yeah.
Would she say that about?
she watches the news probably. She
But
sees the media.
come
thing.
on, it's
Right.
broad day.
Jeez.
Well, people have their prejudices.
Exactly.
Exactly. I think for me, I
Don't force them upon me.
well, she's gonna enact them upon you.
She did. She forced her prejudice upon me.
I've had a strange experience with race
Yeah,
in my
I was gonna
life.
say, what was yours?
Simply because back home in Trinidad, I think black people and the Indian
Mm-hmm.
population had a very tumultuous relationship, and that was my first understanding of race relations.
But we're also the majority of down
We
there.
and a lot of the power does not reside with the
Yeah.
black people in
Yeah.
Trinidad.
Sure.
And I think my dad being a Rastafarian and being very pro-black, he made me very aware of that relationship. So my first experience with racism wasn't black and white; it was actually Indian over black.
Okay.
And then coming to North America, I think racism played a strange role because I was dropped in a community that was not black at all. I was dropped
Yeah.
in Maine and Danforth.
Yeah.
It's like
No,
Filipino, Greek, white.
Yeah.
So I don't think I was more of a novelty, and because of my temperament, I don't think I experienced too much in my face over racism
Yeah.
until I got into my profession, and I realized
Sure. Oh,
that
definitely.
because I don't represent the
majority,
demographics
yeah.
of this country,
Definitely.
that I am exempt from opportunities
Yeah.
with a lot of the major
Definitely.
things that happen, and that's why I have to stick to basketball. Mostly because I think people are ready to accept a young black guy speaking on basketball.
Sure.
Whereas I think I can speak on a lot of things, but is someone going to put money behind that?
Now you have that platform for
Yeah,
now.
well, I mean, that's why we're doing
that's
this,
why
right? I
we're
really
doing
think
this.
like there's a lot of
Definitely.
young people who can talk about different things, but
Of
you're not
course.
going to get them on TV talking about those things. I'll only get asked to talk
yeah,
about basketball.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so the next place we wanted to take this conversation was
Oh, what about media?
how racist is Canada?
Oh, okay.
Because like I think
Okay.
everyone in the
That's
Northeast,
what we do.
in Toronto,
Yeah.
in Windsor, Niagara Falls, we watch a lot of North American content.
Yeah.
So we're very well versed in.
This is the most
Jim Crow.
American province or city
yeah.
there is in Canada.
So we know everything
for
about
sure. I live
Chi-Town.
all over Canada, so
Yeah, so you've
oh
seen
West. There's some racism popping out there. White people are like shout out to my people at West, by the way, but you know there's
It's a
some
different game.
yeah. I've been to some parties. I go to some parties and I was like, you know what I mean. There's
Yeah,
some,
you don't gotta go
they're
too
all
far
like,
to see some racism, even here. In
yeah,
Toronto.
but they're cowboys
You
out
go to the
there.
right
You know what I
party.
mean?
Yeah.
It's,
You go to the right
it's
party, you
cut and
start
dry,
feeling
man.
uncomfortable.
Yeah,
quick.
go to the wrong
But
street
shout out to the West
or
Coast,
wrong
man. I
party
live there. I
or
have
in
a lot of good
Toronto.
friends on the West Coast.
See some racism.
Yeah, so I guess, but the thing is, I guess where I was taking this conversation was like, we don't know a lot about Canada's infrastructure, just like how exclusive it is to get into the upper echelons of Canada. Like, I'm not aware. Like, there's no coverage on the basic news of, you know, the issues of the current United States. Now, is that a result of our society being way more amicable and peaceful, or that we are turning a blind eye to the real, and there are real race issues?
Well,
You go first.
well, I think obviously there's definitely real race issues, but it's about like each person being accountable for who they are, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, some people might not even know what their background is or their race is, but what the society views you as, you are responsible, you know, to stick up for and be responsible for like your people and what they've potentially done in the past. Like Kyle Korver said in his piece, he's like, I think, you know, we're not all white people are accountable for everything, and they're not deserve blame for everything that was done in the past, but they have to be somewhat know that there's a responsibility to what has happened with their people, and that's their people. So, you know what I mean? Slavery was a thing, and they have to. There's acknowledging
up to that.
the responsibility of that, you know?
Justin, what do you tell Jashawn? He's 13 years old, going into high school. What do you tell him about white, or do you tell him anything? Is he aware?
I tell him as much as possible because I know he's going to run into it. He has run into it already
Definitely.
since elementary.
Yeah.
You know,
He's half
'cause
Colombian,
he's mixed
half
race.
black.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he looks black, so and you knew he was going to run into something.
So what have you told him? Like,
or
what
I
got
just tell
no
him
kids.
first you got to empower if your kid is whatever race. I'm not saying there's any supreme or better race.
Let's hope he's not.
You get what I'm saying? Like
No, of
if your
course.
kid is black, you need to show him that black people didn't just start with slavery.
Yeah, that's one of the
You
big
get what I'm
ones.
saying?
Definitely.
Slavery is only 300 years ago, 400 years. Africa is how old? Thousands of years old?
No, longer than that. It's the oldest
Exactly.
Millions.
place. The oldest
Exactly.
place, man. It's older than us. So we've been here for what? 1.8 million?
civilization comes from, you know, you got to teach young black kids that don't think, because every day white privilege tells them that they're less than equal. They're
Yeah.
not equal. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what white privilege does to black kids. You know? So you got to show them maybe you were more, or maybe you're equal at the very least.
Young
you're
kings
equal.
and queens.
Yeah.
You came from royalty. You know?
Straight up.
Like
Kings and queens.
everyone that's black, everyone that's even white people that have their history,
Yeah.
and they talk about it in school.
Yeah.
Yeah, ours is, well,
You know?
we don't control any education system
Yeah.
or financial institution.
So we have to
or
empower them with
governance
that
bodies.
knowledge. So when they go to school and someone tells them something, they know what it is.
All right, well,
You know?
listen,
They know the truth.
we wanted to have, like, you know, I don't see a lot of places where this conversation is happening. So we wanted to make sure to touch it. I think the next question we had was about media representation. But I honestly feel like we could probably go a full episode on that. So we're going to table that topic till next time. Sorry we didn't have more fun, jumpy around stuff. Like, but like,
So
you
the
know,
more serious episode.
yeah, we'll continue to review music and anything that
Yeah.
pops up in the city of Toronto. But I think for today, that was a healthy conversation.
People should go check out that article in the Players Tribune too by Kyle Korver.
Definitely check
Even
that
though
out.
he may not have written it, the shit is well articulated. And,
you got the right guys to write that.
Whoever wrote it did it. Have a good job. All right. So shout out to Kyle Korver, man.
Jersey sales
And shout
going
out to my
up.
boy Nathan Simon back home with the whole Music Nova Scotia thing. And,
Oh, your sister just texted me. Hi, Bailey.
Okay, shout out to my sister Bailey and
All right.
DeAndre 8 and Big Year.
Big year. Congratulations to
Shout out.
DeAndre on his
Congrats,
rookie
yo.
season with the Phoenix Suns. Bailey, you can come home now and get out of Phoenix. That's it for us. We want to thank
Yes.
you guys for tuning in. More to come. This is the Toronto Show. Peace. Whatever happened to peace?